about myself. Some of you might have known me. I've been with Oracle for a long time. I was a product manager for the Oracle database in the globalization feature area for the Unicode support, and then I was also the product manager for the Oracle ×10 in-memory database. I joined the Ravello team last year. Oracle Ravello is actually a technology that Oracle acquired last year. And Ravello is all about helping customers to move on-prem VMware applications onto the public cloud. So this is about helping customers that have a huge investment with the applications, the workload running in VMware and KVM on-prem, and Ravello is a cloud overlay cloud service that can easily help these customers to move into the public cloud. And hopefully I'll cover an overview, and also I will do a demo, and then after that you should really be able to appreciate how simple it is. And literally when I say hours to move your VMware apps into the cloud, that's really how long it's going to take you. So the first slide talked about, some of the reasons why customers want to move into the cloud. The reasons for move on the left is the typical on-prem use cases where customers want to move their investments are sitting on-prem. They want to reduce the data center cost. They want to have the flexibility to spin up extra copies of their environment based on demand. And then, public cloud is the perfect model for that. But there's some challenges info. On the right, we talk about the roadblocks, right? So the majority of the application today runs on-prem, and those that are virtualized, again, I just want to emphasize here, this focus on VMware, a virtualized workload that's sitting on-prem, and those applications tend to be very tethered to their data center configurations. So they may be using layer 2 networking. They will have the VMs all configured based on the configuration in the data center, using the whatever host name or IP addresses that they have configured that works in the data center. So it involves moving all of that into the public cloud can be challenging, because the infrastructure in the data center is very different to the public cloud. And when we talk about this, it's not just at the virtualization level. We're talking about the networking, the storage, the best practices, and the operation procedures that you do in your data center versus in the public cloud is very different. So basically, you have to start again when you want to consider the move to the public cloud. Long migration project, I'm going to talk about that in the next slide. Why is it going to be a long migration project if you want to move your virtualized workload into the cloud? And one of the reasons, I'm going to move to the next slide here, is that the VMware hypervisor as is doesn't sit in the public cloud. So that means there will be some conversions you need to do. So as a summary, Ravello is an overlay cloud service that can take any VMware or KVM-based multi-VM applications and make them run on the public cloud without making any changes. What I highlight here in red is the key here. So you'll use the same VMs that you run on-prem, the same configuration you have on-prem, and the same storage configuration you have without changes, and we'll make them run on Ravello. And I'll try to explain that in the next half an hour or so. So when we talk about moving an on-prem application, a VMware application into the cloud, we're not talking about a single VM, because a single VM is very straightforward. Yes, there's still a little bit of conversion, but I think it would be quite easy to move a one VM into the cloud and make it available. So when we talk about a typical workload, we're talking about a multi-VM application. So if you look at this on the diagram, you might have a cluster of database nodes, right, running on this IP address 192.168.30, and there's multiple database nodes. You have multiple application servers, multiple web servers, as well as there may be some appliances, there may be a firewall, there's a load balancer. All of that makes up your existing on-prem application. From talking to our customers, we found that, yes, you have an on-prem environment, running on-prem, but there's always some additional. Basically, we find for every production environment you have in your data center, there's always need for 5 or 6 extra pre-production environments. So we're looking at maybe you need an extra development environment, an extra QA or upgrade testing environment, or for testing or for training. So there's always a need to spin up another copy of what you have on-prem for whatever use case you have. And then ideal case will be to have that running in the public cloud, and you'll be charged on the usage based on how you need the environment for, right? If I'm doing training for a week, wouldn't it be ideal? I have 50 students I need to set up environment for, to spin up 50 copies of it in the cloud. When I'm done at the end of the week, just shut it down and only pay for 1 week of usage. So this is what we're talking about here. And then now I want to go into a little bit more about the challenges, right? So what does it involve if I have an existing VMware-based workload running in my data center? First of all, like I mentioned before, the VMware hypervisor, the ESXi, doesn't run on top of the public cloud, which means that you can't take these images as is and then put them on top of the public cloud and expect them to run. This will require some kind of a conversion, what we call replatforming. For example, using AWS as an example, you would have to convert these VM into an AMI image in order for it to run on the public cloud. Now, the second part of this challenge of moving it into public cloud is the layer 2 networking. So maybe in your data center today, you're using multicast, using VLAN tagging on all these layer 2 networking features. Those are not available in the public cloud today, which means that when you have converted your VMs, you put them on top of the public cloud, you would have to do some reconfiguration to get those VMs to talk to each other. With Ravello, we preserve all of that. And one thing I want to maybe explain this better so you can appreciate the differences here is that with Ravello, we actually encapsulate your VM and preserve whatever configuration you have in your data center, which means it goes down to the MAC address of these VMs. The IP addresses and host names that you have in your data center will be preserved in the public cloud. Now, as you can imagine you have application server that talks to a database using this host name, using this IP address. When you move them to the public cloud using Ravello, you wouldn't have to touch a single line of configuration because everything is mimicking exactly what you have in your data center. So the networking support is very important. The third part of the challenge here is the appliances, right? The load balancer, the firewall, these network appliances that you have on-prem today in your data center. When you move them to the public cloud, you can get an equivalent version from the same vendor that works in the cloud, but there's no guarantee the features in those appliances will match. So there will be some configuration involved. What we find is the cloud version and the on-prem versions have slightly different feature sets. So that will mean that you will have to reconfigure it. So all of these can be done, right? These are just technical challenges. It means you can reconfigure your app, but by that time, when what you have in your cloud environment will no longer mimic what you have in your data center, then you have 2 versions of the app to maintain. When you make changes to your on-prem version, you would have to make changes directly to your cloud version because they're 2 different versions. So here it's about time and resources in order to move to the public cloud. With Ravello, we actually don't touch your VMware VM. So when you give us the VMware VM, we preserve it as is, and then we'll be able to read the VMware images, and Ravello is then the hypervisor. So when you have it all running in the public cloud, you're happy with the configuration, you actually have the option of exporting those VMs back into on-prem, and then it will just run as is in your current VMware environment, because we don't make any changes to these VMs when we run them in the public cloud. So back to the previous example, I illustrated the same application with these 9 VMs and these network appliances. what we do is Ravello actually encapsulate that. This is what we call a Ravello application. We encapsulate all of that, and then we allow you to publish your app to the public cloud. Today we support Oracle Public Cloud, as well as Amazon Cloud, and as well as Google Cloud. So that gives you a great coverage today. And today we are you have the option of deploying your application to 22 supported regions, what we call Ravello Cloud regions. So let me give you example of a customer use case and the challenges that they went through in order to move to the public cloud. 888 Holdings is an online gaming company from Europe. So they do online casinos, online poker, and so unlike other e-commerce websites where they can just stage one environment and make that available globally, with online gaming companies, they actually have to go through some regulations. So before they can deploy to a particular country, and in the US, it will be a particular state. Each state have its own gaming requirements, right? So they need to spin up identical copies of the production environment for the regulator in order to go through some certification process. So, and the VMware environment, so obviously the whole online gaming environment is hosted in a complex VMware environment. So we're looking at 250 plus VMs. It uses a lot of domain controllers. It has a firewall. It has a load balancer, and it's very complex network configurations. So previously, it takes them 3 months to deploy another data center for the regulator. So every time they want to expand their business to another state or another country, they would have to replicate or clone their production environment, and it would take them 3 months to do that. So, you know, they looked at this and say, well, it doesn't make sense, right? Why don't I just use the cloud? Why don't I take advantage of the Amazon cloud and try to spin this up on the Amazon cloud, so I will speed up my the regulator process for the certification of expanding my business. So they tried twice to move their VMs into Amazon, and they failed both times. And this is because of the network configuration. You know, going through uploading the VMs is one step, converting them to the AMI native image is one, but getting all 250 of them all talking to each other is actually quite challenging. So they already tried twice over 8-month periods and just couldn't get it to work. And then they found out about Ravello, and then with Ravello, it took them less than 2 weeks to get the whole application running. And Ravello has a feature called a blueprint, which is a snapshot of your environment. So once you have your application all running in Ravello on the public cloud, you can take a snapshot of it, called a blueprint, and then next time if you want to spin it up, you just say, create another copy of it based on this blueprint, and then spin it up in this particular region, right? So now it only takes them 15 minutes to spin up a replica of the production environment in the cloud, versus it was taking them 3 months to deploy another data center to host this environment. Now I'm going to show you a live demo. The live demo, hopefully then you will appreciate how easy it is to take your on-prem workload and make them available into cloud. There's basically 3 simple steps. Number one step number one is involve uploading your on-prem VMware VMs into Ravello. The second step will be Ravello automatically discovers the network based on the metadata that you have in your VMware definition files. So when we copy these VMs into Ravello, we automatically know the network setting, and if needed, you can make changes to them. If not, then you just click one button, and then you select the region that you want to publish the app to, and then it will be running in the public cloud in minutes. The fourth bullet here is an optional bullet, is the snapshot, the blueprint feature that I talked about. You can, if you want to spin up extra copies, you can take a snapshot and then spin it up as many copies as you need. So let me go into demo mode. So let me go to a browser. So basically what you do is you go to ravellosystems.com. This is our portal, and then you log into the portal. So here I already logged in. So first thing you do is you create a Ravello application. The Ravello application is an entity that encapsulates all the VMs that constitute your environment. So for AAA Holdings, their application will be like the 250 plus VMs. So in this scenario, I'm just going to give it a unique name called demo. I'm going to creating a demo application. And then as you can see, it brings up a canvas, right? Canvas is a screen where you drag and drop your VMs and you tell Ravello, this is a collection of VMs that makes up my application. Now, before you go there, obviously you need to import your VM. If you click import VM, it will go to a screen which allow you to upload your VM directly into Ravello. As you can see, these are some VMs that I've uploaded previously. The source of the VM files, we can extract and upload the VMs from your VMware environment directly. We can upload from vCenter, vSphere, or ESXi server directly. So if you just click on this, it will ask you for the IP address or the credential, then it will connect to your server, and then you just check the whatever VMware images that you need to upload into Ravello. Now, if you don't have any VMs in your existing VMware environment, you can upload directly from a flat file, either OVF, OVA, or Ravello export file. So that just, as long as on your client machine, it could be your laptop or it could be your desktop, as long as it's mounted to a shared storage where all the VMs are, we'll be able to upload it to there. Or you can create a VM from scratch. So if you're saying, I actually don't have any VM, this is a new application I'm developing, and I need extra environment in the cloud, and I like the ability of Ravello being able to elastically create extra VMs in the cloud, and then so I can add and create my lab environments. You can do that too. You can create a VM in Ravello by mounting a disk image, some ISO file, could be your Linux ISO image, your Windows ISO image, and create an OS from scratch and install your software using Ravello as a lab environment. So so basically this is the first step. This is the most important step, as well as the most time-consuming step, depending on your network bandwidth and how big are the VMs that you want to upload to Ravello. So I already pre-uploaded some of the VMs. So I'm not going to walk you through that process. So as you can see, in my account, I actually have 30 VMs available. I already uploaded them into Ravello. So for this demo, what I'm going to show you a multi-VM application. It's an application called Primavera. It's an Oracle project management application suite. It can be any application or any workload that runs on VMware, because to Ravello, we actually don't look at what you have in your VM, what application you run. So any applications that runs on-prem today in your VMware environment, will be able to make them run on top of the public cloud. But in this scenario, I'm going to say I have this application. It's got an Oracle database. It's got the application server. I also have a WebLogic web server, as well as a client desktop, a Windows 8 client. So as you can see, I just drag and drop these VMs that I have already pre-loaded into my account. And now I drag and drop these 4 VMs into my canvas. And this 4 VMs makes up my application called demo. And if you look at this, the settings that we have are inherited from the VMware metadata file. So these are the settings that I have in the data center version of this VM. It uses 2 CPUs, and 8 gig of memory. Now, because I'm now running in the cloud, maybe when you set this up in your on-prem environment, you were confined based on the amount of CPU and amount of memory that's available on your server. Now that you're in the cloud, you actually have the option of increasing the number of CPUs, increase your memory size. Now, for this purpose, I'm just going to leave everything as is, take the default. And then if you look at the network configuration, it automatically figures out that the Primavera web server and the application server actually are hosted using this subnet 10.10.10.11, whereas the Oracle database is 10.10.10.10, and the Windows client is using another subnet. So we preserve all of that. This is the setting you have in your data center, and for this demo, I'm not going to make any changes. Then the next step, all you need to do then, just click Publish. Now, the first line gives you a summary of all the VM resources that's available. That's part of this application. So it consists of 4 VMs, 10 CPUs, and 27 gig of memory. When you publish the application into the cloud, we give you 2 options. One is you can optimize for cost. Cost means that you can, we will choose the cheapest region that's available for you to publish to the public cloud. The second option is performance. So performance means that remember I mentioned that we currently, as of today, Ravello supports 22 different cloud regions. When you choose performance, it will allow you to choose the region that's the closest to your application deployment. So for example, if I have a QA team in Europe, and I want to deploy this application in Europe instead of US so they get the lowest network latency, what you can do is then you can choose this region, and then you just hit Publish. And that's all you need to do. So what's happening behind the scene then is that Ravello is now going to go to Europe, West 1, and acquire a cloud host, and we're going to ship the Ravello hypervisor on top of the cloud VM, as well as shipping these 4 individual VMs over on top of this host. 2 more things I want to, so this typically takes about a few minutes, depending on the size of the VM and how much data need to be shipped over. I'm not going to ask you to wait for this, just like a cooking show. I already have an application already pre-populated. So the same 4 VM application, now that is turned green, it means the application has now been deployed. By default, these applications are fenced off. So what that means is that in your account, only you can access these, right? So you can't access these 4 VMs outside of the internet unless you ask it to, unless you give it a port number and make it externally available. So by default, these 4 VMs are now up and running, and Ravello offer a console capability. So within your Ravello account, you can now connect to these VMs. So this is an Oracle database VM. I'm just going to log in to show you that the VM is up and running. The host name is what you define in your data center in your definition file. We preserve the same host name and the same IP address. And then I'm sure most of you are very familiar with the Oracle database. Just want to show you that the Oracle database is running inside this VM. Okay. So this is your Linux VM where the Oracle database lives. It's got a 12-watt database, and that's up and running in the public cloud. And I also have a Windows client. So this is a Windows 8 client. So console allows you to get access into the VM directly. So you can look at the Linux VM as well as the Windows VM. So this is the Windows 8 VM I have in my environment. Let me see, and I have the Chrome browser up and running here. So you can click on this, bring up the browser. If you go to WebLogic, you can see it's using the URL, it's connecting to the internal host name that I have. Remember, these 4 VMs are connected together using the same network configuration as you have in your data center. So this is the WebLogic server. So let me see if I can bring up the Primavera application here too in this browser. So this is the Primavera app. Let me log in. As you can see, the Primavera app is now running inside my browser that's hosted in the public cloud, and it's connecting to the application server. It's also running in the public cloud, as well as getting the data from this database, which is also in the public cloud. Now, if you want to, you actually have the capability to add additional services, which I've done here for the Oracle database. I granted SSH access and click external. So you can now also connect to this. If you don't want to use console, you can actually now connect to this and type in the external IP address. So that's 34.212.193.197. That's SSH. Oracle. So this is the same VM that's now running in the public cloud and is available externally. Likewise, I've also made the application server and the web server publicly available. So I have another browser here, the Firefox browser. Just make sure you guys can see that. So if I click on the Primavera app, I can log in here too. So this is not running inside the console. This is now available to anyone with the IP address and with the credential through the public internet. This is, let me see. See, the same Primavera app is now available. So as you can see, you can imagine if you are doing some kind of training class, you can easily clone a copy of this application and then spin up multiple copies of this and make this environment available to your end users. So 2 more things I want to highlight here as part of the demo. Remember, I call out that you can take a blueprint. So assuming these are the environment and you make some tuning to it. Remember, these VMs, you can make changes to it, right? You can log in. If you want to install additional software, make changes to the data, apply OS patches, feel free to do that. Ravello will keep the latest copy, and then once you're finished with all the tuning that you need, you're happy, this is the replica copy, this is the master copy that you want to spin up. What you do, you say, I want to save this as a blueprint, right? So you say, demo 2, this is a blueprint. I'm not going to shut it down because it's running. Now it will create this as a blueprint. Now it allows you next time if you want to spin up another copy. So maybe I push a copy to Europe, right? I actually have other QA engineers in APAC, in Latin America. I want to create additional copies of this application to these users. So what you do is then you just create another application. So demo 3, oops. And then you can say from a blueprint. So from whatever blueprint you want, I want to do it from this blueprint. Then you just create, and then now you have a new application with the same configuration. Just click publish, and then we'll roll out another copy of this application to your user. Now, everything that I've demoed here using the Ravello console actually sit on top of the REST API. So one thing you can do is, imagine if you're spinning up a training class, you want to have, we actually have Checkpoint, which is a security company. Every year they do a conference in Vegas, and they have 1,000 students come along, and then they start doing hands-on labs. And each of the environments consists of 5 VMs. So you can imagine on that particular day, what they need to do is by 9 o'clock, spin up 1,000 copies of the application. Each student get their own version. And at 5 p.m. when they finish the hands-on lab training, just shut it all down. So instead of clicking 5,000 times to create my application, what you can do is REST API, because the whole Ravello GUI actually sits on top of the Ravello API. So you can actually create more, you can script what you need to do. So for example, a blueprint, get blueprint, I think you can say create an application based on a blueprint ID, right? So you can save it as a blueprint, and then you script this in a REST API saying, on a particular day, just spin up 5,000 copies of this based on this blueprint in the following region, for example. So, okay, so I'm going to finish my demo. So I'm going to go back to the slide deck. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the technology behind the scene here. So what we have is HVX. HVX is the Ravello hypervisor. And HVX consists of 3 components. It consists of the nested virtualization engine. It consists of the software-defined networking layer, as well as the storage functionality. All 3 of them allow us to recreate your data center infrastructure in the public cloud. It makes your VM or your application thing is actually running in the data center. So if you look at the diagram here, the VMs at the top, the 5 VMs, these are the application VMs that you just uploaded into Ravello. That's the part of the VMs belonging to the customer. And the cloud VM is the ones that Ravello sits on. So let's go into a little bit detail on the different components. Typically, a hypervisor, such as KVM, Xen, or VMware, runs on top of physical x86 servers. What's unique about HVX is a nested virtualization hypervisor that runs on top of public cloud that's already virtualized. So you look at this diagram here, the Ravello hypervisor actually sits on top of a cloud VM, and it uses binary translation with direct execution to run natively on the CPU for all the virtualization core. And we implemented VMware virtual devices into hypervisor. For example, VMX-Net3, Viscosity, these are the devices that's used in the VMware VM today. And we added those devices into the Ravello hypervisor to make sure that there's no changes required on the customer's part in your VMware. So to these VMs that's sitting on top of Ravello, it just feels like it's running on a VMware hypervisor that runs in the cloud. So no changes is required. The networking piece is also very important. It enables applications to talk to the different software stack, such as the app server talking to the database, and it allows them to do so without making any changes. And also layer 2 networking, such as multicast, VLAN tagging, VMAX, all these features has been enhanced and added into Ravello. As I mentioned earlier, as of today, we have 22 regions around the world. So when you deploy your application, you get to choose which regions that you want your application to be deployed to. My recommendation would be, if you don't care, maybe you're just doing some sanity tests, performance is not critical to you, then you probably want to choose the cost option because that will be the cheapest. Now, if you have a lot of users that's running on doing testing and it's time critical, then you would want to select performance and choose the regions that's closest to the client that's going to use your application. Now let's just quickly touch on some of the use cases where Ravello is suited. So remember I mentioned at the beginning, and Charles is going to go into this in a lot more detail, and he'll highlight some of the use cases that's applicable to Oracle users. So you can look at pre-production workload for dev tests, for IT ops, or security testing is a good one because nobody is going to do security testing against their own data center. Look, can you imagine if you can take your virtualized environment, clone it in the public cloud using exactly the same network configuration that you have with no changes to the VM? This will allow you to have an environment for you to do security training as well as to mimic malware attack to see what would happen to your applications. For ISVs, you may want to use it for POCs, for demos, for people who's doing training. Maybe there's a new version of the app. You want to clone training environments. This will be ideal to have it running in the public cloud with Ravello. And you can also have, production workload running on in the cloud, maybe a separate copy or DR copy. Now, this slide just talk about the benefits of running your workload with Ravello in the public cloud. Let's focus on the diagram on the left. What you see is that red line, right? Red line is the fixed capacity that you have in your data center today, right? Red is you have 10 servers, for example, right? So there will be time when there's during the development cycle, if you don't need to have full capacity, right? So if you look at 1, 2, 3, those are weak numbers, right? So sometimes you only need 5 servers, 6 servers, and you already have fixed costs. So you have 10 servers sitting there idle. If you don't need it, you already pay for the capacity, and you're incurring costs on that. But then when you need it and you don't have sufficient capacity, what would happen is then it would take a long time. You may have to, you have a new release coming out. You actually need 25 environments, but you don't have that in your data center. It would take a long time to acquire these extra resources. So cloud is ideal for that, or else you will see impact to your test environment. You may have to share resources and it delay your release because you don't have sufficient test environments. So the other benefits on the right-hand side is using a cost benefit. Looking at an example where you have an application that has 4 VMs and it's used by 75 QA engineers. So you need 75 copies of this, so hence is a 300 VM environment. In your data center with hosted fixed costs, it's going to cost you 1.36 million, which is 18K per engineer. With Ravello Cloud, this is a Monday to Friday environment, so going to give you 45% savings. So this is bring it down to 10K per engineer. So this is just a sample cost analysis based on some sample workload. We have many customers today using Ravello. I think that's my last slide. Charles, I'm going to hand over to you so you can walk through some of the use cases that you think are very applicable to Oracle users with Ravello.
Thanks, Simon, for the great introduction on Ravello. And thank you, everyone, for taking some time today to sit with us on learning about the latest and greatest in Oracle's infrastructure as a service offering. As you may or may not know, Oracle bought Ravello last year, and since then has made tremendous improvements as part of their IaaS stack. So my name is Charles Kim. I've written numerous books on the Oracle space. I am an ACE director, but I also happen to be the president of the Cloud SIG for the IOUG. And for those of you who are not members of the Cloud SIG, I strongly recommend that you join and take part in our journey with us. As part of SIG members, you'll get access to all the presentations that we do, but also all the white papers that we push out, and you'll actually learn all the newest and greatest technologies that Oracle presents to us. I am also a VMware vExpert, and since this is a lift and shift kind of technology for VMware, I can actually talk more about how VMware people can actually and will perceive Ravello. All right, so we have a book on Oracle Cloud, and we're going to actually release an updated copy at Open World this year, and we also intend to include a lot of the content that we have today on Ravello as a chapter to this book as well. And in addition, we also have a chapter that we're going to include on bare metal cloud services as well. And so if you are interested, for those who are attending today, please send the email to hello@viscosity.com, and we will gladly provide you a Kindle version of our book. So also, as part of the VMware technology that we're heavily invested at, I'm also the co-author of the Virtualizing Oracle book as well, and we will probably put Ravello in that chapter as well, which is also going out for the VMware conference next month. So to get everybody caught up in some of the cloud workshops that we do, obviously we do a big cloud workshop at IOUG, which we did this year at April, but we're also doing a lot of regional cloud workshops. And the next cloud workshop that we're doing is for the Northern California Oracle user group, which will be held on August 2nd and 3rd near Oracle headquarters. And we actually will do a full day hands-on lab that starts with the basics of infrastructure as a service, storage, Oracle database backup service, and this year we're going to start including Ravello as part of our hands-on lab. And in fact, I believe Simon's going to actually come and co-present at that particular workshop day as well. All right, so this is a little bit about some of the places that I'll be speaking at. So obviously in early August, we're doing a full hands-on lab, but near the tail end of August, we're doing a cloud experience workshop for the Suncoast Oracle user group, and we're also slated to do another one in September in Virginia as well. And so if you're interested in participating or even getting access to all the webinars that we're doing as part of the Cloud SIG, feel free to email me or ping me on Twitter. All right, so as you know, Oracle acquired Ravello, and it's one of the biggest investments that Oracle made last year. As you can also see that from a infrastructure as a service investment, right, and what Oracle invested in R&D, it is $5 billion plus. And so as part of the infrastructure as a service offering, the Ravello stack is part of the 2.0 new features that Oracle is promoting as part of that cloud service offering. And so I'm going to make this quick. I know that we don't have much time, but I did want to share about a event that I attended a couple of months ago at Oracle headquarters. So part of Simon's team, the Ravello team, invited a lot of the VMware vExperts, which is pretty much equivalent to the Oracle ACE program, but for the VMware side. And as I mentioned, I happen to be part of that, privileged to be part of that as well. And also a lot of the bloggers for that event. And when I was first asked to participate in that event, I was kind of skeptical. I was a little bit worried about how other VMware vExperts would perceive Ravello. And while attending that event, I was quite surprised to find out that a lot of them embraced Ravello. Ravello was well accepted by the vExpert community and by the blogger community. Just like we have in Oracle, just like DBAs are always looking for alternative solutions to reduce their on-premise footprint. The VMware vExpert guys and ladies were also interested in looking at how they can reduce their VMware on-premise license footprint as well. And likewise, they were also looking for alternative solutions to augment or even supplement VMware. And so from that perspective, the VMware vExperts did receive Oracle Ravello well. Also, just like everybody knows, cloud is the new buzzword for a lot of the CIOs and CTOs, and a lot of companies have mandates that they must be in the cloud. And so this gives a lot of the VMware folks the opportunity to leverage Ravello to fulfill that requirement. And some of the attendees that came were previous Ravello customers before it was acquired by Oracle, and a lot of them were curious to see what happened to Ravello after the acquisition. And some of the feedback that I heard was that they were really impressed with Ravello after the acquisition, and more so, they were not aware that Oracle's infrastructure as a service was that mature, and so that was a really good thing for them as well. So continuing on, I'm going to also talk about how we can lift and shift development environments, how we can lift and shift test environments, and talk about how we can do that in the future, which I can't really talk much about, but I'll expose a little bit how we can even do production workloads in the future, and go into more details about upgrading and using Ravello for testing suites for EBS and talking about training opportunities. Right. So just like I mentioned before, this is a highlight of the vExpert Blogger event that I attended at Oracle headquarters. And the one last thing I wanted to note was that everybody loved the roadmap where Ravello is going to be going in the next year. And so we were all under NDA, but and we can't talk much about it, but there are a lot of good promising things that will actually significantly improve performance for Ravello. All right, so let's talk about lifting and shifting a development environment to Oracle Cloud, right? So, and let's look at an example, in particular, e-business suite, right? And so when we take an environment that has a database and multiple application tiers that compose a web tier, reporting tier, forms tier, and concurrent manager tier, right? Taking something like that and migrating that to, let's say, for example, AWS, right? Does also require that there's a lot of work that has to be done by the DBAs. And if you happen to be at a company where those skill sets are lacking, or even where you just don't have the time, right? And so leveraging technologies like Ravello becomes an easy way to clone the entire e-business suite stack to the cloud, right? So in this particular case, right, we can easily take VMware or even KVM workloads and leveraging the multiple methods that Simon mentioned, literally lift and shift them to Oracle Ravello Cloud using vCenter or via OVAs or whatnot, OVF or whatnot, and spin up a blueprint, right? Spin up a environment and then save it as a blueprint, right? And you can actually, from that blueprint, spin up dev, spin up test, right? And the amount of EBS environments you can clone become literally unlimited, right? And so from an EBS perspective also, right? If you have a production environment and let's say that you need to go do a DR test of that production environment, right? You know, for a lot of people can't afford to have DR data centers, and for those customers, they can use Ravello to test their DR strategy. And I know VMware customers who actually do this right now with eBusiness Suite. And in particular, what they'll do is they'll actually take a isolated network in VMware, right? And they'll clone the production database, clone the app servers and web servers and concurrent manager tiers into this isolated network, right? And they'll actually position numerous Windows VMs, right, that people who are testing can log into, right? And because it's completely isolated, right, you got to first use the VMs as a jump host to access this other isolated instance of eBusiness Suite. And then they do their full regression testing over there, right? And so likewise, we can take the exact environment, right, and lift and shift that to Oracle Ravello and do our testing that way as well. And the key benefit is that in that situation, right, you're only paying for the amount of time that you'll be using for that testing. So instead of spinning up all these resources and hardware and software, right, all we're doing in this case is, let's say it takes us 2-3 weeks to spin up a DR environment, right? That's all you'll be paying for. Okay, so I also want to mention that we did talk about eBusiness Suite. Let's also talk about PeopleSoft. I don't want to leave PeopleSoft in the backseat either, right? So Viscosity and Oracle jointly published a white paper, and it should be going out sometime this month. It's been approved. Now it's just a matter of just dotting the I's and crossing the T's with Oracle Marketing. And it's basically a white paper that talks about deploying an on-premise PeopleSoft application and database to Oracle Bare Metal Cloud, right? So, so look for that white paper, and that particular white paper will also be included as a chapter in our Oracle Pocket Solutions Guide. Also, since that particular technology is part of the bare metal, I also want to make sure that since we're talking about Ravello, that everybody knows that Simon's team has already published numerous white papers on lift and shift of PeopleSoft from on-prem to J.D. Edwards, even eBusiness Suite, and even Siebel. So you can look for those key buzzwords, look for Ravello systems, and like, for example, PeopleSoft and J.D. Edwards eBusiness Suite and Siebel, and you can easily find those landing pages. And I checked out this particular one that you see on the screen, and it's full of information and literally has step-by-steps on how to migrate lift and shift of PeopleSoft to Ravello. Okay. We talked about taking a test environment, right? But the cool thing is that once I instantiate one environment from my production copy, right, and let's say I created a dev, for me to go and create a test and QA environment is simple, creating a new application from a blueprint, just like what Simon showed you. And we can rapidly provision those environments. I know that earlier that Simon mentioned 888 Holdings and Checkpoint as customers. There's another customer that you saw, Red Hat, right? So Red Hat, each year they do a new release, as everybody knows, right? And the issue that we run into is that because Red Hat is a global software provider, that they need to be able to provide access to all the latest and greatest Red Hat operating systems to all the international communities, right? And they need a mechanism to be able to train not only their internal employees, but also all their partners. And leveraging Ravello and the 22 data centers or domain geographical regions that Simon mentioned, right, that they're easily able to accommodate training and get and provide all the elasticity to meet the demand during their peak times. Okay. So one of the things, like I said before, Ravello has a lot of technologies that they're introducing in their roadmap, and that includes, you know, integration to things like bare metal to significantly improve performance and increasing how they leverage BT technology and whatnot. And so we are doing more of these, more on the regional side, and as we do regional presentations, we'll update a lot of y'all on the latest and greatest. Okay, so from an EBS perspective, right, the key thing here is that as you spin up entire applications and database, to support end-to-end e-business environments, right? Think about DBAs who are doing upgrades of e-business suite. So if, for example, let's say you're going from, if you're old customers and you're going from, you know, release 11i to R12 per se, or even 12.1 to 12.2 releases, right? The amount of time that DBAs spend in collecting information on patches, but applying patches, debugging patches, or even merging patches, right? It takes forever. And to be able to spin up an environment for them to actually rehearse an entire upgrade from end to end, right? It takes an enormous amount of time to time and effort to be able to provide an environment just for them, right? So leveraging again Ravello, right? We can quickly spin up an environment to do end-to-end testing of our upgrade process, right? And even and along the way, right? Reduce the number of CPUs and reduce the footprint for memory, because this is, again, only a few people are going to be logging into this environment, right? And so we'll be able to create the Excel spreadsheet of step-by-step processes, so that when we do our production deployment and upgrade, it'll just be a literal copy and paste, right? And the key thing to note here is that you're only going to be charged for the amount of time that we have the Ravello environment up, right? And when you're done, you just spin down the VMs and then you'll quit being charged for that environment. So that's all I have on the use cases. If you have any questions, feel free to email me or look me up on Twitter and Facebook. And at this point, we'll open it up for questions.
Thank you, Charles, and thank you, Simon, for sharing your insights and expertise. We did have a few questions come through. The first question that we received: wouldn't deploying a blueprint with an Oracle database to the Google Cloud Platform be a support license violation? Does Ravello catch that?
Okay, actually answered it through the chat, but I wasn't sure who, so I sent it private to IOUG headquarters. But let me recap here. So Ravello Cloud, so the underlying cloud provider is just a hosting platform for us. Ravello is the hypervisor that sits on top of it. So all your VMs is actually running on Ravello, and we actually don't expose, when you select a region, we don't expose the underlying cloud provider. So to you, when you run your software on top of it, it's on top of Ravello. So all the licensing as well as the supportability issue is whether the VMware VMs with Oracle software can be supported by Ravello. And you go to My Oracle Support, there's a clear support statement about Oracle Database and Ravello. Oracle Database is supported to be run on top of Ravello. If there's any issues, the Oracle team will look into that and make sure it all works. Now, Melanie, I'll answer the second question too, because I noticed someone was asking about RAC on Ravello. So yes, RAC can be deployed on Ravello. In fact, we have written a blog about that. So if you just go to google.com, search for Ravello RAC, you should go directly to a blog about it, and we actually have blueprints that have an Oracle RAC installation running on top of Ravello.
Great, thanks so much, Simon. The next question that we had come through: what additional overhead should be expected for the Ravello hypervisor, since it is nested virtualization on top of already virtualized infrastructure?
That's a very good question. So it depends on the type of workload that you have in your application. If it's CPU intensive, you're not going to see too much overhead, because we actually can make direct call to the CPU. So probably you'll be able to get 99% of what you get today with nested virtualization in terms of CPU. Now, for network and for disk IO intensive applications, then that varies depending on the workload. So you may be, with the nested virtualization, you may get about 70 to 80% of the throughput that you're getting without the nested virtualization. But I do want to talk about something here. It was something Charles and I discussed. There's actually a roadmap item of Ravello running on bare metal cloud service. No, today I didn't want to confuse you with the message today. Today I want to introduce Ravello to the IOUG community because a lot of you actually are not familiar with this service. So I just want to show you how easy it is to lift and shift your on-prem VMware workload into the cloud, and there's a service called Ravello. What we are building very soon is that Ravello will run on top of bare metal cloud service. So Ravello, the HVX hypervisor, will be able to run natively on top of bare metal. So it won't be going through that nested virtualization layer. So that will be a time for another discussion. Then hopefully that will have the same performance as customers who today run their ESXi server on-prem on the x86 server. You will see similar performance. Maybe you get even better performance because the hardware, the spec of the bare metal server is actually a very powerful machine versus what you have on-prem.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Those were the only questions we received thus far, but do feel free to contact speakers at IOUG.org with follow-up questions from today. We will be sure to connect you with Charles and Simon, our presenters. And Simon, Charles, any final thoughts before we conclude today's webcast?
We're good.
Yeah, I just want to add that obviously this is IOUG webcast. And we talked about moving workload into the public cloud. We have a lot of blueprints. We have tested internally and have blueprints for EBS, JDE, PeopleSoft, Siebel, Agile PLM, all these different application tier. You should be able to just lift them as is and then make them run in the public cloud. And it doesn't have to be Oracle software. I know obviously this is an Oracle user group. Like I mentioned earlier, whatever runs in your VMware environment today, it could be some third-party app that consists of some Oracle stack or no Oracle stack in some way. Just look at Ravello as a hypervisor that runs in the public cloud that can interpret VMware images. And one thing I forgot to mention is that when you move the workload to Ravello, you actually no longer need to pay for VMware licenses because that VMware licenses is required when you have the hypervisor, VMware hypervisor. Ravello actually replaces that. So when you move to the cloud, you no longer need to pay for the VMware license. That's it, Melanie. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Simon. We appreciate the final thoughts. And at this time, I'd like to give a big thank you to both Simon and Charles, our speakers from today, as well as the IOUG Cloud SIG. Before we conclude, please make note of our upcoming webinars and past webinars by visiting www.ioug.org. A recording from today's webcast will soon be available on the IOUG website in our Resource Center. There is a survey after this webinar for you to complete. We thank you in advance for your feedback. Again, we appreciate you attending today's webinar and have a great day.
All right, thanks, Melanie. Thanks, Simon.
Thank you, Charles. Thanks, Melanie. Bye-bye.